Northeast Community Development Initiatives meeting number 16. Appreciate your being here. Hopefully everyone signed in at the sign-in table and you grabbed one of each of the handouts. So you've got all that we're going to go through tonight. And the handouts cover the summary and meeting minutes from the June meeting, as well as you have meeting minutes and a summary from the July meeting. And then the other two handout packets you have are frequently asked questions that came out of the July meeting. And then you should have the actual agenda from the PowerPoint outline from the July 19th meeting. And we're going to go through all of it tonight. I'm Dr. Stephen Holt. I am the facilitator of our activity tonight. We're starting a little early. A little earlier than the 6:30 moment. We've got a lot to talk about and to work through. You will notice on the wall the principles of agreement around how we do what we do, and that is that your voice matters. As the committee members, everyone speaking in and speaking up and sharing their thoughts, speak your truth, being honest and transparent, and then listening for understanding. And those of us who are together, there will be some discomfort sometimes as we're hearing what is going to be discussed, but that is part of the process. And then we're not here to try to fix all the issues and the items. We accept non-closure, which means everything may not get resolved tonight, and that's part of the process. And then remain respectfully engaged. It's important to cover that, especially when it comes to opportunity for public engagement or public response. Is we want to hear from you, but in hearing from you, to remain in that position of being respectful around the work that's being done, especially these who've committed their lives and their time and their energy for the work tonight. So with that being said, we're going to go to our meeting minutes approval between the co-chairs.
Okay, so what everyone has.
Sorry.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Everyone has a copy of the minutes in their packet. If you could just take a moment to review those before we agree before we make any edits or adjustments, and then agree to accept them.
Did you want to do one at a time? Did you want to do the June meeting minutes first and then make a decision on those and then go to the July, or did you want to do them both?
I think we'll just read them all at once and then decide to accept them all at the same time. Okay, maybe just about another minute here. Okay, so let's start with June 21st, 2018 minutes. Are there any edits or questions on those minutes from the committee? Okay, all those who want to accept it, just hold up your green card. Great, thank you. Okay, July 19th, 2018, the joint
Madam
meeting.
Co-Chair, Janisha didn't get a chance to hold up her card yet. You didn't hold up your card. Okay, so all in favor, the sign of the green card? Yeah, okay, beautiful.
All right, so July 19th. Any questions or concerns, edits, comments on the joint meeting? All right, all those in favor of accepting that, raise your green card. Perfect, Ms. Smith? All right, perfect, thank you.
So- All right. We've got item number 4, which are report outs. And so we will begin with our Community Outreach Subcommittee. And Quinn is not here tonight, and so asking Jennifer to take that lead. Thank you, Jennifer.
Hi, yes. Altogether, I think the meeting went really well. We got a lot of progress done. I pretty much began by Prosper Portland just going down a list of the things that they've accomplished to move us towards our outreach goal. It did focus mostly on the development of the collateral and talking about how we want to split these up into specifics and the measures that they're going to take to follow up on some of the success stories that we've already heard to capitalize on that and incorporate it into the collateral. Then the second half of the meeting was really focused on hearing back from Flossin, which was really great to hear what they had to say. It was really good to hear their kind of their genesis stories, which is what they went into, and how they're very familiar in this sort of work. I think what we all came away with was confidence in their ability to handle what we're hoping for them to take care of, which is, assist us in the outreach goals. But I think we were also very aware that we wanted the process to be transparent. So the question is, how can we honor the transparent process, but still move forward with Flossin? I think if you wanted to add anything.
Excuse me, Madam Co-Chair, thank you.
Did you guys just talk about a timeline for when these would be ready with the specific text for each bucket?
I'm not entirely sure of a timeline. I know they've already secured a photographer to go and start the interview process for following up with some of the other success stories, but wrapping them into this, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if that's correct. Yes.
Do you know the timeline, Yvonne?
It was.
No, there was.
Yeah. Open and ongoing.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Investment Allocation Subcommittee, Haben.
The investment reallocation subcommittee met on Tuesday. Maurice, Leisha, and myself were present. We had a staff member from Prosper Portland for part of the meeting, and we kind of ran with it for the rest of the meeting. I think we didn't resolve anything, but we felt like it was a really good meeting because I feel like we got to make a list of all the questions that we had and what we needed to do our job as a subcommittee. So to follow up this morning, I sent Kimberly Moreland, and Tori was CC'd on the email, but we asked for a couple documents that we need in order to make our decisions and recommendations and come to the larger committee. One was we wanted the number of approved and denied applicants for each budget category, that is the PIP, property development loans, commercial property loans, home repair loans, and community livability grants. Two, we wanted the race, income, family size, net worth, history in the URA, and other criteria used in the selection process for each of the budget categories that have been funded to date. We wanted yearly breakdown for funds dispersed in the last 2 years. We wanted outcome reports of businesses granted loans or funding. We want a summary of repeat receivers of funds, whether from the same budget category or different categories. We wanted numbers served by loans and by individuals. We wanted a clear distinction between businesses and individuals. And then we wanted loan amounts funded per business or per individual. We also had a couple questions. Where does interest from the loans go? What services and benefits does it provide to the community? What conditions and accountability standards are in place for the individuals and businesses receiving grants or loans? Are conditions and measurement metrics in the works to hold future fund receivers more accountable? With that in mind, we felt that we need to stop all funding activity till we get resolution and answers to all these questions before our next October meeting. With that, we're gonna place a vote within our the larger committee today. Sorry, I can't talk. To stop any funds from going out till we look at those documents. And Leisha and myself are going to draft a letter to Prosper Portland asking that. So we want to place a vote with the committee on that.
So I just want to add that part of that decision came from the fact that we had an opportunity to look at a progress report that we don't have copies for everyone tonight. But in this progress report, the Prosperity Initiative, our investment program, has nearly spent all of the funds for that part of the program. So there was a $3 million amount allocated to that program. We've spent $2 million. There was a goal of 40 developers, property owners, and we've already helped 30, but we have none of that detailed information about those 30 property owners. And we're looking forward to get that information to make sure that that money is going to the right people. And we want to be able to be proactive in that. So that's why we're going to be requesting that all funding be stopped. We want to make sure that the most vulnerable in our community are being helped. And right now we don't have any information to determine if that is happening. So we're asking for this committee to vote on this request for us to write that letter and send it to Prosper Portland Executive Director and the board to ask that they cease all funding until we get this information so that we can really oversee and understand who we are giving these dollars to.
Do you know what the timeline on receiving that information would be?
We do not know what the timeline on receiving that information, but if it's in line with how long it's taken us to receive information historically, I don't even know if we'll get it before our October meeting. Yeah. That's the goal, but
So if the dollars are kind of siloed into different buckets, would one possible solution be to cease funding for this particular bucket and then continue other areas of funding?
The reason in the past when the reallocation committee was looking at the progress report, we were focused on the buckets that had no funding.
Yes.
But in order to figure out where that money needs to go, we need to look at the whole picture. So we want to seize everything, get the whole picture, and then once we know that, then there's like, for example, ADU is no longer happening. Portland Housing Bureau is not doing it. There's $1.8 million, and we would decide where would that money go. But without seeing all these different pieces and information, we can't make that determination. So that's why we want to seize everything, because we have these numbers, but we have no context, or like we don't know what's going on. Okay. So that's the whole purpose of seizing it, so that we can make an informed decision going forward.
And I want to clarify, we're not seizing it, we just want to freeze the funding.
Yeah, freezing, sorry. Freezing is, yeah.
And I think another point to that is that the buckets on this, there are 2 buckets that are almost already spent down, and the rest are not moving at all. So I don't think we're in any jeopardy of hindering those buckets because we're still working on our outreach. People don't know about it. There's other hindrances to those dollars being spent that may have little to do with what we can do as a committee. So we're looking to basically get more information on the two buckets where we know money is being spent or has already almost been spent. So I'll share that over there.
That makes sense. So the two categories in which it's already,
I don't think we're hearing you. Okay.
the two categories in which it's already almost completely spent or 2/3 of the way there, has all that progress been made within the last year?
It's really hard for us to determine where that money is, at the break points for each of that, because we don't have the data. Our progress reports are very output heavy and not outcome heavy. We don't have the detailed information right here, so it's very,
And this program has been going on for 2 years, and so that's why we requested a yearly breakout, because we don't even know if the money was spent within the last 3 months or the last 2 years, so we don't know how it breaks down. And yeah, like maybe freezing it might seem like harsh, but at the same time, if we're creating more equitable ways that people are like getting helped and the money's getting to the communities that really need it, then by all means, let's take all the time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially if, as you say, there are some that have almost all been spent. You kind of need to, has like an audit been done on any of the money spent to date? Probably not, right? That's it.
if it has, we don't know about
Right,
it.
okay, so that makes sense. So then, if we vote, would we be able to see the drafts before you send it out? And it, just kind of make sure it's not like a blanket statement to like, oh, yes, write whatever you want, sort of thing.
Sure.
Would that be okay to ask for?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Can we make sure that that mic is down right above not the one by the phone? 'Cause are there any comments from or questions from our members who are on the phone?
Another thing I could suggest too is, like, for the sake of transparency, Leisha and I can sign it as the co-chairs representing the committee, but we can have a letter writing session where we all sit down and do it as we would open it up for everyone, and if people want to join us, they're more than welcome to, but we will take the ownership of doing it. But this benefits all of us, so if people want to come, we're going to send some dates for you guys, and people can join us. I think Leisha and I both are open to that. I can speak on.
Please,
Okay.
and just for the sake of recording, remember we're being captured, so I know I'm kind of, being a stickler about speaking to the mic, but if you don't, two things happen. The folks who are here can't really hear you, and then second, it's not captured for the recording. So thank you very much. And so in relationship to the discussion, Tori Campbell is here to kind of field and respond to some of the concern as the committee desires to engage. So he'd love to be able to interact. Shanisha.
Okay, I was looking through the frequently asked questions, and you had in the area of page 3, we have question 3, and they talk about how much budget allocations change. How would the budget allocations change if we increase maximum indebtedness? My major concern when we're talking about funding distribution is the fact that the lowest people on the totem pole, if I can say it that way, tend to still not be informed of not only the funding, but the allocations of the funding. And I don't understand, because when I see this, how much money has been already distributed, the $238,000, it's like, we've been at these meetings, and it's like, we don't know how that disbursement is going also. I don't know if you do.
We don't.
But, and it's like, it was, first of all, there was a huge amount of money, and then all of a sudden, a huge amount was distributed. And it's like, where did it go? And who got it? And did the people the most disenfranchised who needed it, did they get any of this funding? And so I'm really glad that the question that you're asked, Haben, is we need to stop right now and figure out where this funding distribution is going to, and who got it and who did not.
Excellent. Tori, did you want to?
Yeah, I had a couple questions of clarification, but I first wanted to start by saying this is excellent. I think this is why you guys have stepped up, is to actually have these kinds of like critical conversations around how we're spending our dollars. So I'm actually excited. I was talking with Hobbin before the meeting started, and I got that email this morning at 7:43, and I was like, cool, like these are the things we've asked you guys to dig into, and I know it's been a long time coming before you guys actually get to this work. So I just want to echo that I really am excited, and so I don't want you to feel like you have to like, oh my God, are they going to freak out about this? Is this going to be something they won't be happy about? This is why we all have come to this work. So I just want to start by that. And even with respects to whether you need to write a letter or any of those things, this is also kind of our first time, if you think about making like a recommendation like this. So it might be, I don't know what the appropriate protocol is. So you're totally welcome to capture it in a document, in a letter, if you want to, all those things are fine. We would also just be just the same happy with saying, hey, we want to make a recommendation to pause the spending on this program until we have this information made available to us. So however we want to do it, I just want you to know that we're willing to roll with you on that. And I look forward to the conversations over the next couple of months, because we've also been reviewing this and seeing where the dollars have been going. And so some of these questions have also been coming up internally as well, like what do we do here? So that's just one thing I want to say. I think the couple points of clarification that I have is the first one is there are some questions you have on there, I think, out of the 7 that we could immediately be able to provide for you. Would you want that and then from that be able to make a recommendation to the committee, or do you feel like what we've seen enough tonight is enough for us to be like, no, we're good, we want to move forward with the pause? There is some information on there that we will have to see how long will it take, if it's even accessible. So that's one thing I wanted to just ask in terms of a point of clarification.
So I would say that question is too vague for us to answer, because we don't know what those 7 questions are that you are referring to, that you have
The
information.
ones that she just read out, that Hobbin read in the
She
email.
read more than 7, right?
It was 7. Well, there were 7 points, and then there was more questions.
In those 7 points.
Correct,
So-
yeah. So I'm just saying, if we could, do you want to pause tonight, irrespective of if we can provide some of those questions to you, that information right away, or do you want to just proceed with your desire to make a recommendation to pause? That was one question I had for you.
Do you have some of the answers to those questions currently?
In terms of, I can't provide the data tonight, but we can provide those pretty quickly.
Then I'd probably recommend pausing until we can actually get the information,
Okay.
because what we're being asked for, without the other side of the information, it'd be hard for us to say, let's go forward,
Okay.
because if the answers aren't the ones that we're necessarily looking for, it'll just continue the cycle of spending money in a way that we can't justify as a committee.
To add to what Maurice said, I think these questions and these points came about after 2 hours of spending, discussing, and figuring out what questions would be relevant to making good decision as a committee. So I feel like each one doesn't weigh less than the other. Like, they all need to be answered in a way that we feel is satisfactory for us to make good, informed decisions.
Okay. The other question I have is, because this will impact, there are certain applicants that have already applied or are preparing to apply that, based on our criteria, do meet the lens of who should receive them within the neighborhood. If this decision does happen tonight in terms of pausing, how would you like us to proceed with them? Because that is something that our team would have to wrestle through. Do we need to inform them, hey, the program is on pause right now as we really review the programming and the allocation, or after those applicants, and I can be real specific as to how many, once I go back and talk with my team, do we allow them through? So this is just a practical, once the decision is made, we want to be thoughtful to people that we've been talking with for the last maybe month or week who are expecting to try to receive a PIP grant.
Maurice.
So I think some of the challenges that we're having is that we have people that are interested in applying, that we feel like we want to ensure that the most needy are being served. We haven't gotten the information that says, okay, we are actually having a deep impact on the most needy, and we haven't really gotten an impact on who we're actually serving. And so the reason why I would sit there and say, if they can hold on for 30 days, is because we want to do our stewardship in making sure that we are having an impact on those that have the most need, and it would be unfortunate if a bunch of applicants get accepted, and then we look back and say, wow, there was actually more needy people that could have used those funds, but because we didn't take the time to actually dig deep into this question, we then overlooked those people, maybe caused more displacement. And so that's where I think our committee was coming from, is how do we ensure that those that are closest to displacement, we do an impact that prevents that from happening.
I totally agree with what you're saying, but I also wonder what type of awareness campaign do you expect either from us or what do we expect from you to make sure that that information gets out to the community, that they know there's something that exists? Because I don't see that happening so much. When I talk to people personally or talk to people, they'll say, I didn't even know there was funds available. And so I'm wondering, how is that information going to be distributed to the most needy, like you said, the people who actually need it more than people who are getting it because they've been maybe in business for a certain amount of time, whatever, and people who want to regenerate and start their businesses or start something who don't have access?
Yeah, I think my initial answer to that is twofold. One is there's obviously always room for improvement when it comes to communication. Even that's why the subcommittee has met and are trying to figure out ways that we can further share the word. But also, that being said, this year the dollar amount that went out, I believe it was a total of $5 million, but $3 million of that was actually through the PIP program. And when we look back historically on that particular program and what it's intended to do, this year was actually a record amount of dollars going out the door. And so those dollars don't go out the door without people being aware of the program. So even though we definitely can increase the visibility and people being aware of the program, people have been accessing it, of which I believe the total this year was like 49% did go to the African-American community. So I think it's important to note there is that bit of that balance, that people are accessing it. Yes, we want more, but I think what you guys are raising, which is totally valid, which is, but are they the ideal or the right, whatever the right is, but is that the profile that we want to ensure receives those dollars? And so I think the pause would allow for us to dig into that a little bit more.
Dorsey?
So I feel like we're kind of getting away from what we were talking about. So are we voting tonight whether or not we're going to draft this letter? Is that correct?
Draft and
Draft
send.
and send the letter, and then at that point, they'll make a decision if they're even going to grant that decision. Okay, so.
Jennifer or Haben?
And I just wanted to respond quickly to your question where there's applicants currently, and that's dependent. I mean, the applicants can, if you guys get us the information we need, us dissecting it, and as a committee coming up with the answers or the allocations, that shouldn't take time. So I think that's more dependent on your team and then getting us the information that we need to make informed recommendations. And I feel like, yeah, telling the applicants that they might have to wait 30 days or 60 days, that's going to be, like, if you guys don't want to tell them you guys have to wait 2 months, maybe the documents can get to us before our October subcommittee meeting. And then by October meeting, we can all decide as a committee what our recommendation can be. It's all about getting the information at this point.
Correct, but there will be a pause. I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that there are some folks in the queue, and we will definitely move accordingly to get information to you quickly.
Let's go to the phone real quickly, see if there's any other comment or question from those who are on the phone. If you're on mute, we cannot hear you. Any questions?
I don't.
Thank you. Karen?
No, no question.
Thank you very much. Jennifer?
Just to play this out, I'm hearing that part of the concern is that some applicants might not fit the profile that we believe the need is. And so if we get this data back, I think one of two things can happen. We'll either A, see that the people are fitting, are not what we think of as the most impactful way we can spend this money. But they meet the criteria of the application, which means that they're allowed the funds, right? So is the ultimate goal then to rewrite the criteria for receiving funds?
So as I understand it, this action plan is a living document that can be changed in ways that we feel help to leverage and/or distribute these funds in the best possible way to impact the most people that we can in a positive way here in the ICURA. So I don't think that we're asking or we're trying to necessarily negate or penalize people who qualify. What we're asking for is information so that what Tori just talked about with $5 million being spent, $3 million being spent, people are knowing about that. That's more than what we know. That's more than what we're able to discuss on a consistent basis as a committee. And so what we don't want to happen, which I think has happened historically, is that we are reactive to things that are already done. And we are 2 years in, there's been $2 million spent of this pot, and I couldn't tell anyone on the street about who that went to, how they spent that, what they've been doing for the community since. If there's just so many questions, so I think that what we're trying to do by asking them to freeze the funds is not about a punitive way of hurting anyone who's in the pipeline or anyone who's already received money. We just want to be able to do our job the best way that we can and oversee those funds. So that's my take on it.
So then let me, if I could, unless Haben, you wanted to add to that, I was just going to say, are we ready then to make a determination around the next step? But go ahead.
And just to clarify, Jennifer, part of it is, so for example, Tori mentioned 49% African Americans got the fund, but are these 49% African Americans that got it? Did people get multiple loans? Do they fall within the income? That's not equity. Even if you're talking about people of color getting access to these funds, you have to think of equity and making sure that everybody has a fair ground. Are the same people getting information and they're the ones that keep coming and getting money from different buckets? Maybe changing the criteria. If you get money from one bucket, you don't get money from another one in the same calendar year. Maybe there's different restrictions. So that's a fair, even thing for the community. Like, for example, Haben shouldn't be getting one from PIP and then another for under my business name, and we need to know the criteria. Can people use their business names, their individual names? We've been getting conflicting information about that, so we want to see these things in a written format so that we can assess that. Yeah, and maybe that means changing the criteria, but we wouldn't know that till we see all the paperwork together.
Okay. So 2 points. One is we're going to call for the decision within the time frame that was allotted for these areas to be discussed. And I know the next one, the hope was to have discussion around it. We'll need to adjust our time. I don't know if everybody can see that. So we'll need to adjust the time allotted, which is what for you?
What does that represent, 12 minutes?
This just represents the timeline of the section identified. That's what this represents. So let's call for the question then of the CDI Oversight Committee. All who are in favor in drafting the letter to pause any further expenditures, if you would raise your green card. Okay, 100% of those who are present. And then on the phone, are you in favor of pausing?
Yes, this is Karen, yes. Yes, this is Con.
Okay, 100%. So a letter will be drafted, and it will be, who's going to lead the drafting?
Alvin and I.
So
We'll send an email to all the committee members. If anybody wants to join us, it will be a writing session, and we'll sign it and send it out. And after the session, we will definitely send the draft out to the whole committee.
thank you very much. We'll move then to the next item, which is the joint meeting with the Northeast Housing Strategies Oversight Committee. Two things to mention. One is you have a handout of frequently asked questions.
We have one quick follow-up question, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have one clarifying question.
Yes, sir.
So we voted to pause, and we voted also to write a letter kind of explaining the why. Just as a clarification, that's what we did, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So the indication is the request is to pause any further expenditure, and then you're going to write a letter to that point. All right. Two items from your handouts that address or respond to the July 19th meeting between the CDI and the Oversight Committee for Northeast Housing Strategies. You can take a look through the frequently asked questions, and this particular handout that has various boxes is representative of the PowerPoint that was used at that night. All right. Madam Chairs, how much time would you like to use for this particular discussion? How much time would you like to
I
allot?
just really want to see if there's any questions that folks that weren't able to attend the drop-in session may have had after reading this document, or if folks that were able to attend the drop-in session after we've left and before we got here tonight, you've come up with other questions that you may need clarification on. This may be a good time to ask those questions, and we can have a discussion about that. So maybe 5 to 10 minutes, if that, depending on what
Perfect.
questions people have.
We'll set it for 10, and if we need to extend, that's in your hand. So, Dorsey.
So I have to leave, so I'm going to just say one thing from the meeting, not really a question, but something that Kim from Prosper Portland shared with us, that they are working on the impact study. So I know a lot of us have been asking about that, to receive that, so they are working on the impact study, and not sure when we'll get it, but they are working on it, so I just wanted to share that information.
Thank you. Haben.
An accident, but I attended the Monday meeting about the frequently asked questions, and again, the same issue came about, which is it's great that we have this information, but when you don't have context with information, it's just information. It doesn't do you any good. It's like going to take an exam and you haven't studied, you don't have any textbooks, you don't have lectures, and you just don't know anything. You're just taking the exam. So it's not even easy to ask informed questions when you don't know the context of these things. We found out there were several committees that came before us, and that was news to me. So I don't really have a lot of questions because most of our questions were answered. But again, these documents could have more context to them. It would be great.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I think just to piggyback off of that, and in the same vein of providing more context, I think it was kind of glossed over at the actual meeting, how the housing set-aside was formed and why there are two committees and how that's a unique scenario for URAs. I don't know of any other one that has two URAs, and how the nuances of that works. Like, we approve certain things as a whole body, but then the impact of those decisions aren't followed through or under our purview anymore. And so that is something I'd like to hear more about when we are presented the history of how we got to where we are today.
Just for point of clarification, when you said how two committees were formed for the URA, what are you?
Oh, so the housing committee.
Portland Housing Bureau? Or,
Yes.
Or the Oversight Committee for the Housing Strategies?
So we had a joint committee, right? So those two committees that make up the joint committee.
Okay.
For the joint committee, yeah.
All right.
Kind of like an introduction. This is a joint committee.
So
why.
the history of how the Oversight Committee for the Housing was
Yeah.
developed, and then how this particular committee was developed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all of it.
And I think that also speaks to kind of the history of how the housing moved from Prosper Portland to the Housing Bureau, how the set-aside, how the TIF lift, the 20% that the mayor gave, all of that, how it all played out to get us to where we are right now, I think is the deeper questions that we're looking for, understanding where the dollars are coming from, and how we interplay
Okay.
as a URA.
Okay, so question to the committee in regard to the Portland Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland. Is there a question in terms of how the Housing Bureau itself was, how it came to pass under Sam Adams when they made that determination? Or I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm tracking.
So I think any and all of that information is good, but I think specifically we were talking about, in the meeting on Monday, it sounded like Prosper Portland used to do housing in some way or form. And when there was a point when those housing dollars and or properties shifted to the Housing Bureau, and understanding what that looked like, what that history was, how that interacts now. Does it not? How are we interplaying with each other as committees? I think that's what we were trying to get, to understand a little deeper level of, because it gives context, as Haben was talking about, as we have these conversations.
Excellent.
Okay.
Shanice?
My question is, in relationship to the funding, who does not have access to this funding? Because remember, it has borderlines as to where the ICURA exists, if you're in certain borderline areas and you have access to the funding, if you're not, you do not. So it's like the 49% who received housing had to be within a certain borderline area. How do you be able to access any of the funding if you're not within those areas? You know, is there going to be some sort of way to create funding for those people who need it but will have no access? We talked about this a lot, just because there's how the lines are drawn, because I went to the meeting for Portland Housing Bureau and all that, and some of those, and they were saying no, and it was interesting to see so many people who would have no access to the money just because of how the borderlines are drawn. And so that's always going to be a question of mine, who can have it based on being within there and who cannot have funding. So it's not going to be equitable when we talk about money distribution and funding distribution. It's just not.
Excellent. Any questions on the phone?
No questions.
Connor, you still there?
Con, are you there?
I am. I don't need questions right now. I do have a question, looking at the report, but that could be later on.
Sorry, which report?
Could you repeat that?
The attachment.
We're having trouble hearing you. If you could give us another shot, sir. If you could repeat that, please. I think we lost him.
Was that a question for me?
Yes.
Yes, could you
question's
repeat
for
your
you.
question, please?
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear can you repeat the question?
So can you repeat the question?
Yes, if you had any questions related to the joint meeting and the topics being discussed tonight.
The microphone is pretty. I can't hear it as well.
Okay. I apologize about that. If you wanted to weigh in at all on the discussion about frequently asked questions or the joint meeting, please do so.
No, I'll just save my questions for some of the items that are the attachment that Yvonne sent out. I was just looking at the report, i.e., for example, MISO, what some of the outcomes in terms of engaging in small businesses. What was the data, or what's the hard outcomes other than they met with 60 businesses, or the number of businesses? What was there other matrix other than the meeting itself?
Okay, I think you're talking about the discussion that was happening earlier about dollars being expended. Am I catching you?
Did you hear him, Con?
Yes.
A little bit. I heard something about it was an early discussion.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're having such a difficult time with our phone system tonight. I apologize about that. Con, if you would do two things for me. One is, could you text your question in to someone, that way we can capture it, and then please don't go away. Do you have other phone numbers? Do you have phone numbers of committee members? You can email it to Yvonne or text it to Maurice.
Yeah, or text it to Maurice.
Maurice.
Thank you, sir. And until then, we'll keep our conversation going. Any other comments about the joint meeting? Tori, did you feel comfortable addressing kind of the context, maybe addressing just a little bit in terms of the establishment of Portland Housing Bureau in Prosper Portland? So I think that might be good to answer, or at least to contextualize tonight. I think that can be addressed tonight.
Yeah, so if the question was around, and I know there's a variety of things that you guys have questions around, and so I'll just share a little bit, but in terms of how the Portland Housing Bureau was established, I think maybe that's the main one I can talk about briefly. But under Mayor Sam Adams, prior to this decision to really split off what is now called the Portland Housing Bureau, that was all housed under PDC or Prosper Portland at this time. And so under the mayor's direction, they separated out all the housing activities and to become really its own bureau or agency. But because all of that, their primary funding source is still the tax increment financing. And so all of the housing developments that you're seeing, affordable housing, that's all taking place within urban renewal districts. So even though they're separate entities, the funding sources that our agency, Prosper Portland, and the Portland Housing Bureau draws from is tax increment financing. So that's just probably a very simple way of understanding how the breakup has
And
happened.
so then Prosper, then of course PDC, their responsibility was what?
So now Prosper Portland's primary responsibility can be broken up into two areas, which is development, so structures, buildings throughout the city, as well as economic development activities, which is typically business recruitment and growth, or even working with small businesses throughout the city. And Portland Housing Bureau, their primary responsibility is housing matters. And so if you called Prosper Portland saying, I have a question around down payment assistance, I have a question around home repair, we would say that's not our role. We can direct you to the Portland Housing Bureau. If someone was to call the Portland Housing Bureau and they would say, I want to have someone help me with my small business, or I want to learn around the possibilities of moving our company to the city of Portland, who can I talk to? They would say, you need to call Prosper Portland.
Was that helpful? Yes, go ahead.
Follow-up question, are there any other URAs that have two oversight committees?
I believe that the housing one, is it just over northeast, or is it?
We're northeast.
Northeast. So I believe this is the only urban renewal area within the city that has two committees that are working on action plans that are connected to their respective agencies. We do have other action plans, such as in the Gateway or the Lentz area, where there are other urban renewal areas, but I don't believe in those places do we have oversight committees as we have structured here in Northeast. And I think a lot of that is because of the historic displacement that's taken place with respectively, and particularly the African American community, why we have focused our energies here, and I think also why there is this desire to do a collaboration with community oversight to ensure dollars are being invested appropriately.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I will add that on the Portland Housing Bureau's website, all of the information around the history and the formation of the Northeast housing strategies is there. So you can capture how it came to be, what happened with, at that time, Mayor Charlie Hales, and how that $20 million was allotted, and all the reasoning behind it. So, any other questions or discussion around the joint meeting? Yeah.
Tori, can you come back up for one more moment? So as we're continuing to have these discussions and these conversations, is there an expectation from us that we should be working towards, or I know we're getting the information and we're trying to have these conversations, but what's the next step that we're looking at?
Regarding a decision
regarding-
around,
Right, so are we able to work amongst ourselves to come up with a recommendation in our time frame? Is there something else that Prosper Portland is expecting of us, the Housing Bureau is expecting of us? I just want to know what you guys are thinking, because
Yeah.
we don't know exactly.
yeah, no, that's great. In our staff report out, I do have a section that actually talks around kind of future forecasting, either recommendations or decisions from this group that we are hoping to see or just want to make you aware of. Some of them are time sensitive, other ones are just decisions that you will need to make, but really I think you can kind of drive when that time needs to happen. So I wanted to share that today as a point of conversation, which will help us inform. I know one of the things you guys wanted to make a decision on tonight was the level of, like the frequency of this meeting here. So just, and I think why we wanted to share that is, to your point, it adds the context of if you say, we don't want to meet but once a quarter, but then you realize there are all these things that are coming up that are pending, that would create strain. So I look forward to having that conversation in the next few moments with you.
All right, I think we're done.
Maurice? Okay, perfect. Excellent. We'll go to staff report out. Kimberly Moreland is not here tonight, not feeling well. And so, Yvonne, you're going to talk about summer updates.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving me a moment just to speak on Kimberly's behalf since she can't be here. Okay, so over this summer, as some of you know, because some of you were there, I think Shanisha, Gwen, who's not here, and Jennifer helped us out this summer at a lot of our community outreach and tabling events. So we had, I've lost count how many, total events, because there were quite a few over the span of, from My People's Market to last weekend. So almost 3 months that we had events throughout the community, and they ranged from north-northeast, such as the Vanport Jazz Festival, to East Portland, like Division Midway, their Festival of Nations was this last weekend. And so we had over, I compiled the emails together, and we had over 50 community members who voluntarily gave their emails to acquire more information. The first step is to put them on our email list to get just the basics of what we do, and they'll be strategizing as far as those who we had conversations with will touch base directly. There were over 30 Prosper Portland staff members who volunteered their time over the summer as well, and across departments, not just us, not just me and Kim, not just Tori, but our asset management department, development investment, professional services even, accounting, as well as the members of our team. And we connected a lot of, I said dozens, each event we talked to, I don't have an exact number, we talked to dozens of people who came and either approached our table or, part of the outreach is engaging them, even if they don't want to come and stop and talk to you, just engaging them to come and find more information. So we were able to connect those who had particular questions on things with the program manager. So we had business cards for all of the departments. So if someone wanted to know, say, more about home ownership and home repair, on this brochure, there's Kim's information as well as our down payment assistance and home repair loans contact at Portland Housing Bureau. So much to what Tori was saying. Even though we fund it, we don't connect with them necessarily on those programs, but we can direct them to those particular parties. And also, I think you guys have this and you guys have all seen this. To Jennifer's update, our goal is to refine the information that's inside so that it's specific and pretty broad as far as what the program entails, i.e. the down payment assistance program or the community livability grant, which is for nonprofits specifically. So we're working on that. It's just a matter of creating the copy and making sure that it's general enough that the little things that change, we don't have to keep, updating it, but just so enough information that if somebody's looking for the program, they can figure out if it's right for them, but then they'll still want to contact the program manager to get the specifics, just make sure that they qualify. So That was a lot of information, sorry. So here's just a couple of pictures. So like I said, Kim, myself, we were at Vanport Jazz Festival, as well as Amanda Park, who is on the Entrepreneurship and Community Economic Development team. She is the program manager for Mercatus, which is a platform for minority business owners to be able to list their business on the directory so that people can find them for particular services. And so actually, one story that we're really happy about, one of our photographers who shoots pictures for the Mercatus website, he actually got a connection to a business lead. Someone actually found them on the Mercatus directory. So we're slowly getting there. It's, if he acquires one new client from the directory, that's a success. And this is what we're hoping to do, is to help all the business owners who, don't have the visibility to get the business to them. And then on the right there is Kim and James Taylor and Bobby Lee. So Bobby Lee is the director of our department, and James Taylor is the producer of Vanport Jazz Festival. So we're hoping in these relationships that we develop with these organizations and these events to cross-promote, and so next year we're hoping to have an even stronger force and stronger collaboration with Vanport Jazz Festival. I think that's it. Yes, that's it. So that's my update. Sorry, thanks.
Questions for Yvonne? Any questions from the phone? Thank you, Yvonne. Tori, facilitator.
Yeah, so I have the next probably 4 things, and so that I want to update you on. The first one is I wanted to update you on where we are on Facilitator. So the last time we talked, Dr. Holt's contract had ended, and so we had shared that we'd be moving forward to look into another process of identifying a facilitator. At that time, I also said we had initially thought at the time we wanted to do an RFP, have a different approach to how we secured his services the first time, and we also said that we would invite some of you to participate. From that decision or that conversation that I had with you over the last few months, we just thought a little bit more around where things are, not only with the work that you're doing, but just the larger context of what's happening in the Northeast area, and felt like it'd be actually, for a standpoint of efficiency and also just continuity, to continue to allow his services to support the work of this team. I think we all have benefited from his facilitation, and we also believe that there are certain things that are coming up here in the next season that his support in facilitating will actually be very valuable. One piece that we did want to note, even though this is in our responsibility as staff to choose a facilitator, we still feel like it's very good and necessary to allow moments for this group to facilitate itself. So his contract moving forward over the next year is going to be on an as-need basis, meaning his facilitation won't always be present, which means there will be chances and opportunities for co-chairs and others to facilitate the meetings. But we'll just make those conversations, make those decisions of when we feel like his support and services as a facilitator are going to be necessary. So I just wanted to update you on that.
Alicia.
So the contract for the year will be an on-call, on as-needed basis. And will those funds continue to come from the general budget, or will they be coming from our $900,000 bucket? How are you guys paying for that, and what does that contract look like?
Yeah, so the dollars will not be coming from any of the $32 million. They'll be coming from outside of that.
And is at the same amount of 10?
I do not have the details on my brain right now to tell you what that is. So. But it's comparable, I believe, to what we've talked about or what the contract was previous, but I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
And so then Prosper Portland will be determining the as-need basis?
Mm-hmm. I think it'd be also be important to just a spirit of collaboration to try to do it in concert with our co-chairs, but we definitely still feel like we could take the lead on making that decision.
So I just want to reiterate again, and like you said, Dr. Holt's been doing an excellent job because this is what he does. But I do want to reiterate that I do feel like there are still conflicts of interest with having him as our facilitator in terms of how many projects he's involved with in terms of the URA. and not having a clear distinction of where his voice is in terms of where allowing us to speak for our, not necessarily for ourselves, but without any, whether perceived or real, influence. So I just want to reiterate that. I guess there's not much else we can do about that, so thank you.
Jennifer.
So a question was texted in. It goes back to our conversation earlier regarding the frequently asked questions. The individual asks us to reference page 10, in which there's a passage at the very bottom. It's a specific question, so perhaps this could be, I can ask the question and then we could just hear updates later. But it's referring to how many people MESO has helped. Miso, sorry. And it says 130 businesses, and I think the question is, did they meet with 130 businesses, or did they actually provide financial assistance or some sort of substantial assistance to 130 businesses? The root of their question is that the 100K seems a little vague, so I think they're just hoping for more details on that.
Okay. We can definitely provide that update, exactly what type of assistance or services that were provided to those 130. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Haben.
Okay, going back to the facilitator, I think last, I don't know which meeting it was when we talked about the contract is ending. The perception that I think the committee had was it was up to us to make that decision, and that we had a lot more weight on that. And last debrief meeting, Leisha wasn't there, but I was there, and I said, yeah, next meeting, let's have Dr. Holt, because we haven't, as a committee, decided how we want to go forward. But going forward, we probably will take turns facilitating. And I agree with Leisha. I do think Dr. Holt is involved in a lot of different committees, and she's right. Like, I don't think he would necessarily be biased, but I think I don't think it allows people to freely express themselves to the extent that they would if he wasn't the facilitator. And I don't know how other people feel about it, but I think Prosper Portland, we've talked about this to the staff multiple times, and I think as people that are like here, like this week, we met for Prosper Portland meetings 3 times this week, and as people who are committed, the least Prosper Portland staff can do is respect our wishes and to do our job right. To be honest, like, it makes me feel really upset that you don't consider our feelings at all, and I personally, I don't know if I want to continue long term. And it's not just this, it's just a symbol of like there's a mutual respect for the commitment and the time and that we are spending here. I can speak for myself, I can speak for Leisha. We're busy people, we have careers, we have health issues, rain or shine, we're here. And when Prosper Portland kind of makes decisions like this, it's a slap in our face.
I do want to remind you that the decision in terms of choosing a facilitator is up to us, and that is something that we put into the project charter. So that's really where the decision came from.
Maurice or Jennifer, which one? Jennifer.
I'll move forward. Just to, I guess, emotion aside, there were a number of things that we were told how to operate, because not a lot of us are familiar with public forums and how the guidelines in which to operate. And we were all informed very, in detail about the importance of appearances. And so I think to a lot of, to piggyback off of what my co-chairs are saying, or not co-chairs, committee members are saying, is really just appearances matter when you're trying to rebuild trust. And we were all told, a certain level of appearance matters, and we can't, meet together because it can be misconstrued. And this, in a very similar way, can be misconstrued, and it doesn't make us look good or feel good.
Maurice?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with this committee is that we've been given direction from Prosper as far as, again, I kind of feel a little bit like a mushroom under a log, because it's like I get no daylight, I get no light on some of the why, I get no light on how the money's being spent. I mean, one of the questions I would ask is quite simply, does Prosper feel like for a reason we need guidance in the sense of a facilitator, that our co-chairs aren't capable of doing it? I think we're all committed here. There's no one up here getting a check by doing this. We're doing it because we want to see our neighborhoods benefit from the prosperity that Prosper has given to others, that they said in these dollars that they're going to make sure meet the most needy. And so with that said, that's why we're here. That's why we're dedicating our time. And when we have problems getting information, I think these brochures are great. But the question that really happens when we go on the streets and someone says, hey, I saw this brochure, Maurice, I know you're on this committee. Hey, Haben, I know you're on this committee. How do I access these funds? And we have to look in a blank stare and say, I don't know, go to the website. And we went there, and it just does a lot of stuff, but there's no, Prosper has not given us today a clear roadmap that we can give to people to access those funds. Prosper has not given us today enough information that we could actually make a determination that, okay, you mentioned that 40% of those funds went to African Americans. I think that's great. Can you tell me here that 40% of those funds went to the most needy African Americans within our URA? So you can tell me yes on that.
No, my head is shaking in that you guys have raised that question and wanted that information. And we're going to look into what of that, those 7 questions and many of the additional sub-questions in there, can we provide that information to help inform you so that you can make those critical decisions.
But you have the information, and that's my point, is you have the applications. You know who those people are. That's a question that you can answer for me right now, today, and say, yes, they have. I feel comfortable that 55%, 60% went to the most needy. Or no, I don't feel like that actually happened, right? You have that information. The problem that I feel as a committee member is I feel like I'm just trying to pull teeth to try to get that information. You know, you mentioned this discomfort, so I'm giving a little discomfort right now. I want that information so that I can make good recommendations to Prosper Portland, or at least understand the path in which we're going. Please provide us with a roadmap for all these so that when we hand something out, this is nice and glossy, it looks good, but it's not a roadmap. Give us a roadmap. Give us the reasons why you feel like you're going to make a decision as Prosper Portland so that we can better understand the direction of Prosper Portland. We're open and honest here. I would hope that you guys would be the same.
Janisha?
Can I respond to that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I do want to say in all of this is there's a bit of a narrative here that's being framed that at least me in my role, and obviously the work that we're trying to do, that we are intentionally trying to be an obstructionist to your progress. And I don't believe that that is the truth of it. I feel like actually we need your input. As much as that might not always feel that to be the case, and I can say perhaps we've not always had the track record to express that, but we as an internal staff, the programming, the decisions that we've made, we are making, in our minds, the best, most informed decisions, trying to be equitable, trying to change the dial. But we realized even in forming this group, we need your perspective. And so it's not, and in some instances, yes, we could have provided that much more information. In other instances, it's not until you guys take a look at what we've presented where you begin to raise flags or raise concerns or start asking for additional information that actually helps us go, okay, hadn't thought about that. I mean, that is, I mean, we're humans in there. We don't have the end all be all in terms of knowledge. So I say that because I want you to know that I respect that when you guys say, hey, Tori, this does not look clear, or we have questions, can we have information that we can bore into that helps us make that decision? That's definitely something that we want to be committed to. Otherwise, this is a waste of your time. Now, it's true, and I have no qualm saying this, that there have been instances over this last year where you guys have asked for information, where Leisha's asked for information, and some of that has not been provided to date. You know, we had a conversation about it earlier this week, saying on those things, we need to be more on the spot and more responsive, because again, it takes away from your time and energy. But overall, I want you to understand that we value and need your input and perspective to help us make those decisions. So even to the point of, like, the pamphlet is a great example. That's not the end-all, be-all, you know, but it's good for you to say, hey, Tora, I actually went out and tried to use this, and my community members like, it looks cool, but it's not helpful. Well, that's good for us. Now we can go back and say, how do we beef this up, right? That's where I would like the relationship to be. It's not there yet, and I know some of that has to do with trust and the inherent suspicion of an organization that has historically done wrong to people of color. We get that, but I just want to continue to put forth, it is our desire to work collaboratively together for this to happen. And we have to earn your trust, so we have to be responsive and give you the stuff you need when you need it. So,
Well, I guess all I'm saying is there are some answers that you already know, and trust is both ways. So
yeah.
And so if you know the answer to, and I feel like a lot of times we ask the question, and we kind of know the answer, but whether it's the wrong forum to actually say this is the answer, right? But again, when we start talking about the dollars spent, I feel like there's some answers that are known there. There are answers that are known on the need for this committee to have a facilitator, like some of our chairs had mentioned. It's like, okay, so there's a reason behind it for Prosper that hasn't been fully articulated to us on the why. So again, as a committee member, I get confused, because I'm like, I hear people saying, I would like to, run the meeting, right? And they look at it as a growth experience. And then we have Prosper saying, hold back. And so then the question becomes, why?
So there's two questions. One is the numbers that you're requesting for the PIP grant. I cannot rattle off the top of my head all the businesses that receive them, their income level, are they worthy of being recipients of that? But we can provide that information, and we will look into that. And if we don't have it, we will need to make you aware of that, as opposed to just silence, suggesting that we have it and we're withholding it. To the point of a facilitator, there have been times where it has actually been essential and necessary, not only in this committee, but in other committees. It's as a bit of a best practice for us to provide facilitators to help with conversations, either that are, for a variety of reasons, could be very tension-filled, can create discomfort, or in some instances, like this is a public meeting where there is the need to not only navigate the conversation that we would be having here as a group, but also from the community. Like, there are instances where we have felt and have seen and have benefited from having a facilitator, both here and in other spaces. And so there are a number of our communities where that's the case. So that's one of the primary reasons why it has been something that we found to be a really healthy thing to have in the tool belt when it comes to community engagement. But we've also talked about and seen the real value of this has been a place of growing for many of you, as this is kind of the first community you've been a part of. And I agree, I welcome the chance for you to be able to facilitate this space. Matter of fact, Dr. Holt, in his, earlier this year, led a whole workshop for a number of you around facilitation. And so when we say as, on an on-call basis, it's the intent, the times that he's not, it's the chance for you to be able to do that very thing that you were trained to do. So I hope you don't see his presence here as anything other than to be supportive of an opportunity for conversation and process. And it is a judgment call on us. And in some instances you will see it and then you see the wisdom in it. Other times you'll be like, I don't feel it. I don't see why we're having it. But nonetheless, that's the decision that is being made, and we hope that you see the wisdom of it down the road. So that's what I want to say about that.
Janisha?
Well, no, I'm pretty much in agreement with what Maurice has said. I was going to say, kind of chime in the same way, to be able to say that it's important that you continually show your hands. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, your presence is here, but the hands are not shown. Mm-hmm. And so we're pretty much, we pretty much are the ones who speak for the community that's not present, And it's like, even when we talk, I don't know about you or you, but when you talk about these meetings and what's going on and what's capable of what they're capable of maybe receiving, they know nothing about it still. And it's been going on for a while. When I look at the amount of money that's been fund distribution, it's like, whoa. So out of that 300 point so many millions, you've got a huge amount that's been distributed, and I don't think the community even knows. The ones that needed it probably the most don't even know that it existed. So I'm just pretty much in agreement with, I don't want to throw rocks at anybody because I know you're doing whatever you can. But at the same time, I think it can be more.
Anyone on the phone, Karen or Con?
No, I'm just listening. I agree.
I'm sorry, who was this?
I think it's Con. Is that you, Con?
No, that was Karen.
That was me, sorry.
Yes, please say it again.
Can you say it again? Hello, can you speak up?
Who to who? Who you?
Karen, if you would share your thought, please.
Oh, I didn't have anything to say specifically. That's what I said. So, and I thought you asked.
She agrees with what was said.
And then Con, did you have any comment?
I don't. I mean, I agree with everybody. From what
Yeah.
I heard, I agree with everybody.
Thank you very much. Any other comment on this? Okay, we will move to the next. Conflict of interest.
Yeah, for this one, I was just reminded or encouraged by Kim, who's not here tonight, that there's still a number of you that have yet to fill out the conflict of interest form that we have, and I think we have some copies made available. So that's something that you definitely, as a committee member, would have agreed to sign, really for your protection, to understand the clarity of boundaries that need to be set. So I don't know if we have a list of who hasn't. If not, we can definitely reach out to you personally to make you aware of it. If you know you haven't signed one, we can provide those for you this evening for your review and signature. So that was all I had on that note.
Comments?
Is this in relationship to the committee? The
Yes.
conflict of interest?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just signed mine today
Okay.
and handed it over.
Thank you, Hop.
And this one is updated from the one that was given out at the beginning.
It should be. Is that correct, Yvonne? Because I know the first one, did have some things in there that weren't necessarily fitting, so it has been updated.
Haben.
While people are looking over the conflict of interest, I had a question. So for next month, it is up to the co-chair's discretion who's going to facilitate the meeting?
No, it's up to us, staff, but we will definitely do something, and I would like to be able to have a conversation around it. And I think I think what'll be good too is when we do our debrief, which we have at each end of this one, is to say, what are the contexts where we feel like a facilitator is necessary, so that it doesn't feel like it's just at the whim of. I think that'll be important. So we can have that conversation. But at the end of the day, it would be our decision as a staff whether or not we feel like a facilitator should be brought on board to be supportive of moving the mission of this group forward.
So for each meeting, you guys are going to make that decision for us?
It could be for each meeting. As we actually have this next conversation around kind of voting guide, it could be we can look and see there's a series of conversations that we feel like we might need a facilitator, or we say, I don't think so, just because of the nature of the topic or what it could generate in terms of public involvement. It might be a little bit more dynamic, and you might want to have a facilitator. We might say, hey, I think we're good. We can keep it in-house and have a co-chair or another committee member do it. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comment around facilitator? Yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
I would definitely like to hear, as it develops, as you guys have your debrief, I would definitely like to hear in what context you guys determine like what that framework is,
Yeah.
just to see if there's consistency, and it definitely puts my mind at ease that it's not arbitrary.
Yeah, definitely.
Phone? Anyone from the phone?
Does anybody have anything to say on the phone?
No.
Nope.
Perfect. Fiscal year 1819 voting guide.
Yeah, so this is something that I think that we want to do, continue to grow in terms of creating and streamlining meetings, decisions, information. Even this week, this is not related to this document we're about to go over, but it did make me think of, there have been a number of instances where information has been requested, right? and then life goes on, things happen. You know, things are moving along. And so one of the ways we want to do a better job in terms of supporting you is providing reference points for decisions that need to be made, information that's been requested, what's the status of things, so that you guys are just informed and it's not, we don't have to guess. Because the truth be told, you guys are always asking for information, and that's not a bad thing, but it then begins to be very overwhelming. We're like, well, what information has been given and what hasn't? And so we want to work to create a number of documents that are able to help keep all of us a little bit more organized that we can all access. And this is another example of that. So right in front of you, you have something we put together that really is an opportunity for discussion tonight. And I think it'll also help inform the question of the meeting frequency in terms of the group meeting this way. So what we put together, we just realized there will always be for this committee recommendations or decisions that you will be voting on at any given time throughout the year. And one of the ways we feel like we could help to support and staff that is just to capture those topics as we have here outlined here, highlight in a very brief way kind of the actions that are being considered, whether or not a subcommittee is necessary in it, because I think that's helpful, just to make sure that people understand a lot of the good work that you're doing doesn't happen in this meeting. It actually happens outside of this in subcommittees, of which several met this week. Also, we thought it would be helpful to have a decision sponsor, and I think this is for us, and again, this is a draft, so very open to feedback, but a decision sponsor we thought would be helpful because there are some decisions that are clearly you're making because the action plan says you're making it. There are also some decisions that are being brought to you by outside, committees or organizations, and it's just important for you to know that, so it doesn't always feel like it's all just Prosper or it's all just you. And it also shows that you are part of a larger, I don't know, ecosystem's not the best word, but you're part of a larger community that is also making decisions with respects to Northeast, particularly around housing and other initiatives. And so we try to frame this as like decision sponsors, more or less of who's bringing them to you, and you can see a list of there. And then the last one, this is probably the most important one, is trying to forecast. Like we estimate, meaning it's not for sure, and some of these are hard to tell, but we think that these decisions either will be coming to you for a decision around this time, or just in terms of the rhythm of how you meet, you would probably want to make a decision around this time. And I think that's really going to be a subject of conversation both from this group, and a lot of that will happen within our co-chairs when we just talk around matters that need to come up, and we say, hey, when do we want to have this come to the group? And because there's times where you'll say, that's important, but we need more information or we need more time. And so then that needs to then impact when that decision can come to this group. So we just try to put this together because we realize there's a lot of stuff that's churning and things that are happening. And we, don't want you guys to be uninformed, but also when it comes to making decisions that you have the time and space to do what you need to do to feel good about the recommendation you're bringing forward. So this is what I wanted to present to you in draft form and to talk about, and then see if implementing this would be of use to you.
Did you want to go through each one, or
Yeah,
just leave it like this?
I can, however you like, I can go through each one and tell you a little bit about what that means, if that's helpful, perhaps.
And then we'll field questions, or do you want to do questions now?
I have some clarifying questions on what you just asked, or just spoke about, sorry. When you say decision sponsor, can you define that for me again?
Yeah, the way, and this may or may not be the best way, but when we think of like decision sponsors, like who's bringing this to the committee for a decision to be made on it?
Okay.
I think that's maybe another way I can say it. So, like as an example, number 4, the loan to grant ratio, that's a conversation that's kind of in-house within your committee. So that's, you guys are bringing that forward. But say number 3, the Hill Block property, right? And those are things that are being brought by an outside group, project working group, the mayor. So I think that's where that helps all of you to understand that it may or may not be totally our discretion to determine when we can decide on this. Since we might be on someone else's timeline or have to consider another timeline in terms of when we hear that information and when a decision can be made. I still think it's important for you to still say, here's when we want to slot it in, but it may not be totally driven by you in terms of the timing. So that's what decision sponsors trying to do.
So did you want to walk through each one, or did you want to ask questions now? How would you guys like to do that?
I think that if the questions are about what Tori has already spoken about, I think we can ask that now, but then allow him the opportunity to walk through each one to then follow up, so that. Okay.
Okay.
General comment is I really like this. This definitely helps. I like the estimated oversight voting date because it really keeps us accountable, and these arbitrary days in our head can actually have a place. I was wondering, would you be able to add a point of contact for a lot of these issues? Which would really be helpful if we see something coming up, we're like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of need to follow up on that. Point of contact would be good. And then also, if there could be a column that had like links to important documents to reference potentially, but super helpful.
Okay, I think we can do that.
Maurice, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a general comment as well. These dates that were put together, where did they derive from? Because obviously this committee, some of these issues really haven't even been discussed. And so yet we have these dates, and so some of them looks a little rushed, but I'm just curious on how we came up with the dates for some of these.
Yeah, so our staff, so myself and Kim, we sat down and looked at all the things, and we came up with the dates just based on meeting frequency as it stands today, which is monthly, and I know that's a decision you guys will have to make. Honestly, many of them are not in concrete, right? I think it's just a chance for you guys to respond to something, to understand it could be this way, or you might find that because you just are, different level of frequency, it may not be, or you might find like, that's cool, but we have not had enough subcommittees happening in order for us to make a recommendation to get it. So very flexible on these times. I would say the only ones that I'm not even sure of and would require us to do a little bit more investigation are going to be any decision sponsor that's outside of this group. That would be an instance where we'd have to double check and say like, and it's almost a request, like we'd like to bring it to the Oversight Committee, kind of when can we get on the docket? And I think that then drives, that request should drive when they find themselves on this decision map. So, but all of them we came up with arbitrarily, just in the general sense of we've been meeting monthly and something for you to react to. So we can change them if you guys feel it's necessary. But it also just goes, I know another thing you guys have also expressed too is a sense of, we wouldn't say we've been spinning our wheels, but there's like an urgency to want to move things forward. But at the same time, now that we have some momentum, there may not be a need to rush in the sense of where you feel like you're rushing, but you're not making good decisions. That's the last thing we want you to feel, is not confident in your recommendations. So.
One quick comment, just for point of clarification, for those who are on the phone, Yvonne is sending this voting guide to you now. So what they're talking about, you don't have a chance to review. You will be getting it in a moment. So please make sure you're checking your email. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Haben?
I like this a lot. Obviously, this is the first month we're doing it. Kimberly told me about this, and we can make improvements to it so that it's more, it has more information. But the only thing I would say is, first of all, in December 20th, we're probably not going to have a meeting right before Christmas. And then also, I think it would be nice to have the estimated Oversight Committee voting date versus the urgency would be good.
Kind of a
again,
priority.
context, or context. This needs to be decided in this quarter because it affects this. This meeting, this should, you know what I mean? That would help. For example, the third one, the Akira expansion, I think there's a date for that. So isn't that date maybe January?
For the expansion, I don't think it's January.
What's the date?
For when it happens, it only happens after a decision, a recommendation has been made from.
Okay, how about the increased maximum indebtedness?
No dates have been assigned
Okay.
to that.
So, if there's no dates, there's no dates, but if there's hard dates that we need to meet, then specifying that, or noting this meeting's gonna happen at this date, so in preparation for that, some sort of explanation or more context again.
Yeah.
So that people know why there's an urgency and why it's on the agenda would be good.
I agree, and ideally, this is really a cheat sheet. Ideally, you would all have a good sense of where these things are coming from, so it's not a surprise. Otherwise, this has not been a valuable tool, you know. So, but we definitely can add context to whatever the decision is made. And like I said, the dates for some of them, it was just kind of keeping the rhythm of meeting a month and giving you something to react to. So,
Just point of clarity, in our meeting, we are now at 7:50, which is when we had slated for public comment, and we've yet to go through the actual document itself. So did you want to, committee or chair, co-chairs, would you like to extend meeting, or how would you like to respond to our moment?
I think we should continue with the agenda. Do you have any comment cards?
I have not received any comment cards.
So I think we should continue with the agenda and get through these items, and then revisit if there's folks here that still need to make a comment.
Okay, do you want Tori then to just go through what's on the voting guide? All right, if you could.
okay. So as an example, we've talked about this, and hopefully this is a document through the conversations that you're having and with the co-chairs and agenda setting. This is a living document where you can bring things to this and it kind of populates. So we do, as an example, we knew that the meeting frequency was going to be a decision that you guys wanted to have. So we did put that on here today. Ideally, that would have been something that you could have referenced this and seen it coming a few weeks ago, right? So that one, I feel like that one's pretty straightforward. The second one is around the accessory dwelling unit pilot program, which is part of the $5 million that we gave to housing. And the Portland Housing Bureau and the mayor no longer wanted to move forward with that program. And so then the question is, the community still felt like the opportunity for property owners to build an accessory dwelling unit to create additional revenue for themselves was a positive stream or vehicle for wealth creation. So we're still curious, like, even though the mayor said no, or through PHB, through that entity, there is not a desire to see that program go on. Can we find another way to get it done? And so one of the decisions will need to be, should we retain those dollars within that program and allow us as a staff to either find another way for that program to actually begin, or to create it or not? And so that's a decision that this group will need to make. But the conversation and all of that information actually needs to happen within the investment and allocation group first, and then they'll kind of tear through all those things and make a recommendation to this committee. And we put that as November 16th. That may be too early. That's okay, but that's just the context of what that was about. Yes, Maurice.
I just have a quick question, because you said Portland Housing Bureau was responsible for housing, and PDC has a different directive, although ADU units is housing. So how is that money, if the mayor doesn't want to move forward with it, and PHB doesn't want to move forward with it, and it's housing, how does then Prosper pick that up if that's not in their charter?
Yeah, great question. So as you all remember, there was $5 million that we gave to PHB on the behest of the community, recognizing that housing is still one of the primary vehicles for wealth creation to happen, and we set it aside for people making a certain dollar amount. Even though the Portland Housing Bureau is no longer move forward on it, we're still willing to entertain, is there another alternative for that program to happen if it's not going to happen through PHB? Meaning, as an example, is there an organization in the community that we could fund them? So again, dispensing the dollars out, but they themselves as an entity help build accessory dwelling units, can work with community members to help them figure out how to do it. That's something that we want to put forward to the group. Again, it doesn't, and I think that's also another question, is it starts to feel like, is Prosper Portland getting into the residential side of things? And that's another question that needs to be raised to our leadership. Just because PHB said no, we don't want to drop that off without first investigating, are there other alternatives to see this potential program move forward? Because it is a wealth creation opportunity, and we do have funding set aside. So I think that's where this group can also help us make a decision on that. And I think you guys have already met once to talk a little bit about it, I believe.
Hoppin.
To be honest, a lot of the items for the investment allocation on this list, we are talking about them prematurely. I think it would require us getting all the information that we requested before we can make a decision on where those funds, loans versus grants, how the movement of the money, we can't make any of those decisions. So I don't know if even talking about them today is going to be, we're not there, to be honest. And I think when we have these lists, it would be nice to have them reflect where we are in the process. because we are kind of, yeah, Kimberly mentioned the ADU pilot program, but maybe there is a different bucket. The PIP grant has no, like, we've gone through $3 million, so maybe that is where the money should be going. Maybe there are people that need other resources much more than ADU units. ADU unit implies you have a home and you want, and maybe people need something else before that. So I feel like it's a little premature, but that's just what I want.
Yeah, and I hope that you, again, I remind you guys, really what I want to talk about is, yes, I want to talk about the contents, but I really want to just recognize this as a tool to help guide decisions that need to happen over time. So to your point, Hoppin, if you're like, hey, Tori, everything that has investment allocation on here, we're not touching any of that until we first dig into the PIP grants and the reporting. That's fine. We'll still put them on here. We can strike out the date and just change the priority of when they come up. And a lot of that's got to be determined by you as a committee and a subcommittee. This is just, again, kind of sharing how this tool could work to help keep things organized.
Leisha.
So I just want to make the suggestion, because of the time, that we vote on the frequency of how often we want to meet, because that can help kind of erase this whole, or not, this whole column here around these dates, which I think are probably not relevant to the conversation right now until we make that decision. And then we will have to revisit these dates realistically at a different time.
Correct.
So I think if there's questions about the different programs that you want to have answered really quickly tonight, we can do that. But in terms of dates, let's just determine how often we want to meet going forward, and then we can circle back at a different time on those dates. Does that sound like a plan? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Karen, we'd like to hear from you and from Han.
Yeah, I'm
Khan.
here.
Khan?
Yep, I'm still here.
So, but is that something that you agree with, or do you have another?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we agree. Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you. All right.
so I think what the question we have on the table is that we've been meeting for over a year now, and within our charter, it talks about after the first year, we would move to meeting once a quarter as a committee. And so the vote that we want to put out tonight is whether or not we want to continue to move forward monthly, or if we want to move to our once a quarter schedule. And keeping in mind that within that period, you also have the subcommittee meetings. Keeping in mind that our committee has shrunken to 11 people, so some of us are on multiple subcommittee meetings, and if you look at this here, that's a lot of meetings taking place. Keeping in mind that November and December are holiday heavy, that my feelings are that we meet once in the fourth quarter in October, and that we don't meet again until January as a full body, if we can avoid it for any of these maybe mandatory deadlines that come up later that we don't know about for sure right now. So that's my feelings on it, but the vote tonight is whether or not we want to move forward monthly or move to a quarterly schedule. And maybe October is not the month, maybe it's November, maybe it's December, but just keeping in mind all of those factors when we have this discussion and then make this vote.
Thank you. So what I will do, just to make sure we have an opportunity for everybody on the committee to weigh in, is I will just call each name and then have an opportunity to respond. So I will begin with you, Maurice.
Well, there's a few things, and this is one of the reasons why I think that we should probably meet monthly. Just because I look at this and I see that the Hill Block site's looking at wanting to be in the URA, but we have talked about in extents about how we're going to, if we're going to expand the Hill Block site to the URA, whether other areas that should be expanded into that URA. That conversation has not happened. I see here where we're looking at, the cultural business hub, which we haven't even touched on conversations on. So I see a lot of issues here that really need a deeper dive than these summaries. And my concern of quarterly is that action will be taken outside of our meetings being met, and then we're trying to play catch up.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, your thoughts?
That's true. I do like the intent behind meeting quarterly. In that, my interpretation of it is that we invest more heavily our time into the subcommittees, which do more of the legwork and actually are a little more productive. So in that regard, I do definitely support moving towards the quarterly system. But to Maurice's point, the danger of that would be not having our voice heard collectively and something happening behind the scenes, and then we arrive too late, as we have been. And then the other point would be, if we do put a freeze on it, I want to make sure that we can rally the second we do feel confident in the information that we've received to open this back up to people being able to receive money that they need. So I guess my vote would then kind of lead towards something like yes, but provisions to have like emergency meetings, exactly.
So yes, go to quarterly with the exception of an emergency meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Con?
Oh, that's right. Con, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Do you have some input in regards to the meeting times?
Honestly, personally, professionally, I love meetings and all, but I feel the quarterly meeting is great. It allows me to, and I agree with Jennifer that the subcommittee would be great. Just allows me to kind of get back into, since I missed a couple of meetings in the summer. The quarterly general meeting will be an opportunity for us to discuss once we get things done in the subcommittee. So I like Jennifer's, I guess, proposal.
Okay, quarterly with the exception of a called meeting or emergency meeting. Karen?
Well, I'm kind of torn. I think, why is quarterly and monthly the only options? What about bi-monthly? I can meet monthly or bi-monthly, quarterly. What's the advantage of quarterly over some other pattern?
What is the advantage of quarterly over some other? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, like every other month, for example. Why was that not an option?
You said why is bi-monthly
Yeah,
not an option?
I heard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have no answer to that. All right, Leisha,
Well,
you're thinking?
my immediate answer, which may or may not be correct, is that in our charter, it says quarterly. So would we have to do a charter change to go to bi-monthly? That may be an
Okay.
issue. But it's not that big of a deal. I don't, to try to change it. I don't know if we would need to, but,
No, I don't want to go into changing that charter again. I don't want to do that.
okay.
I don't think it would require a charter change. I think you can meet as frequently as you determine. It was at least quarterly, not only quarterly. Yeah, so it was at least quarterly. You could meet 27 times between, meetings. So, Karen, were you giving a suggestion as another option?
Yes.
Well, I just was thinking about the every other month pattern. I haven't, really had time to think about this. It's just kind of out of the blue here. So I can do quarterly, monthly, or bi-monthly. I'm just wondering.
Right. Okay. So just to capture, want to make sure, and we're going to keep going around the table, just want to make sure that we're capturing your thoughts. So you, Karen, you're saying you're fine with monthly, you're fine with every other month, and you're also okay with quarterly. Did I capture what you said?
That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Janisha?
I believe right now that we're not ready for quarterly. I think that it could be something futuristically that we could get to. I think, but right now that we're not organized enough and we have not created enough of a proposed amount that we want to do to be able to get to it for a quarterly amount. So I think right now we're not there.
I think it could be a futuristic goal once we get organized and we get things on the table and how we want to deliver some of the demands and things that we want to do. But I think right now we still need to maintain it at a monthly, and then eventually maybe go to, once we get a little more organized, we maybe can go to bi-monthly. But I don't think we're at a quarterly decision at this particular point. That's just my opinion, but I believe that we're not there.
Thank you very much. Alicia?
So I think I will disagree a little bit. I think we are organized. I think we as a committee are organized. We're showing up. We understand our charter. We're meeting in our subcommittees. We're asking good questions. I think we are organized. I think the problem is that we don't have as much information as we need to in order to move forward and make decisions when things that are on this list have been brought to us or will be brought to us. So even if we continue to meet monthly, if we don't have the data or the tools to move forward, we're going to be doing the same thing that we've been doing the last couple of months, which is showing up with nothing really to really put our teeth into or to make decisions about. But within the subcommittees, we do have that opportunity because, as Tori said, Prosper Portland will be doing a better job of getting us information and asking us what our thoughts are. And so those subcommittees the way that this is written out, those subcommittees are going to have to meet before the full committee meets. And so, I know that I'm on at least 3 or 4. And so that's a lot of in-between meetings to take on and still show up to a monthly meeting. So I'm not against bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly.
But especially at this time of the year where we can't get people, necessarily to show up now in September, when December and November comes, it may be even more difficult for people to commit because of their jobs and their vacations and their holidays. So I just want us to be mindful of that, making that decision. I also like Jennifer's idea of emergency or you call it on-call meetings, having a meeting if we need to, which gives us that a little bit of movement or ability to make adjustments as we move forward, because I don't want to burn people out.
And so let me just toss this in. You guys have always had the ability to call a meeting. So
Right.
it's to meet at least quarterly. So you always have and always have had within your charter the ability to call a meeting whenever you deem is necessary. So just to be clear, you're saying that you're willing to do bi-monthly in light of all of the work that the subcommittees are doing. Is that what that?
I prefer Jennifer's idea of if we need one, but I prefer Jennifer's idea of on-call or emergency meetings. I don't want to use the word emergency, but
Yeah, as necessary.
as necessary, but I'm not against the bi-monthly. I am against the monthly.
Okay?
And see, for me, I hear that part. I don't think we're ready for quarterly.
So, Janisha, we'll come back to that in just a second. I want to hear from Haben too. So, and then we'll have discussion about what we've heard, but I want to make sure we allow everybody the
I think
opportunity.
I have
weigh
to
in.
go. That's why I'm saying.
I understand. I understand.
Okay, so I have a couple opinions. Initially, I was more, let's go quarterly, but to be honest, based on the amount of work we have and after meeting with the investment allocation, reallocation group, and we're still waiting for the information to come from Prosper Portland, my suggestion was that we meet till November. We have Christmas break, we come back in January, and we decide going forward how we're gonna meet. One other thing I thought of is since we've been meeting monthly at a certain time, people have been more consistently coming. And when you have a quarterly, sometimes what happens is people feel very disconnected from everything, and then it's not part of their routine. It's been easy to come because it's been okay, next month I have this meeting, next month I have this meeting. That's my opinion. It is a lot. This week was a lot in terms of all the subcommittee meetings were in 1 week. Let's not do that. But I do think we're doing a lot of great work, so maybe till November, we meet monthly. January, we come back and we discuss as a group and feel, okay, where are we, and assess. I don't know, that's what I think. Emergency meetings are great, but I think just having a set meeting gives you kind of a structure. That's my opinion.
So, looking at a calendar, if you were to continue to meet the third Thursday between now and November, with the consideration of December being off or out. That would mean the 18th of October and then the 15th of November with no meeting in, we're talking about the overall committee meeting, no large committee meeting in December. If for the suggestion of Haben, that last suggestion, to reconvene in January and discuss going to quarterly at that time, just so you have a point of reference.
And we can see how people feel during the holiday season, and we can assess.
Haben, your mic.
That's just my thought, but.
Discussion, feedback, thoughts?
Yeah.
What would be on the agenda for October?
October, maybe we would have the impact study maybe by then.
Okay.
Would we have the reports for the impact study? Maybe outreach committee, maybe investment reallocation. By some miracle, we'll have all the information it needs to
Because I
be.
think the value of these is when we actually do the report backs.
Yeah.
But if there's nothing to report back, so I'm just trying to be realistic. Like by October, mid-October, will we have stuff to report back? And if it's pending, information from Prosper Portland, then it's a question to Prosper Portland. Like, will we get that information enough early enough to convene a subcommittee meeting to digest that information and then regurgitate it at this meeting? So that's just a consideration when thinking of these frequencies.
Okay. I think the bi-monthly or, ideally a monthly, but I understand about all the different subcommittees. I think one of the things with the subcommittees, if the subcommittee members, because right now it's set up so that the chairs can call a meeting, but allowing the subcommittee leads to call an emergency meeting, as you put it, so that if there's something that's occurring that the subcommittee needs the whole committee to know about, because the subcommittees can't vote. And so that was my hesitation with just seeing the layout. If we're going to do it the way Haben had mentioned, which I think that's a good idea, a lot of these dates need to be pushed back so that there's not decisions being made, although I know this is a draft.
Right, these dates are arbitrary, so I don't want us to get caught up on these dates, right? We can not talk about have to make any decisions about the cultural hub until January or something. But in the meantime, each subcommittee is meeting to hash out what it is that we want to bring to the overall committee in the first place. So
here we are, it's 13 after.
yes.
And we can continue discussion, I'm fine with that, but are we ready to make some suggestion with what to do in regard to this? Chanisha, you had your
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to
okay,
put you out.
very good. Leisha and then Jennifer.
I think that we should vote between quarterly bi-monthly or emergency meeting.
I like bi-monthly.
I would vote bi-monthly.
Me too.
But that was just a suggestion on what I think we should vote.
Right.
I mean, I would say, as he first started, I would say monthly, until we get to the level and then go to bi-monthly. But, I mean, if we had a decision of one or the other, then I would say bi-monthly for me, and I'm done, I gotta go.
So there were two suggestions. So one of the suggestions was Hobbins, and three suggestions. One was to continue going monthly. That was suggestion number one that Maurice mentioned. And then Haben mentioned that you continue through November, take December off, and then reconvene in January to consider whether or not you go quarterly. Did I capture that correctly? And then there was a suggestion of going bi-monthly.
And then there was the emergency.
And the emergency, or as called, or as necessary, meeting as
What does-
necessary.
I don't even understand what emergency means.
I think that meant, this was thrown out when we were just considering quarterly, and the suggestion was quarterly, but if there was a need, we would call together. The understanding that we're not only gonna meet quarterly if there was something pending. But now it sounds like through our discussion, it sounds like the preference is for more frequent. And so, I'm convinced as well that more frequent is better, and my suggestion, and one of the suggestions being floated around, is bi-monthly.
Okay, so then, it sounds like what we've come to is monthly or bi-monthly. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes, I think so.
No.
Monthly through November, and then taking December off, and then reconvening in January
So that
to
means no
consider.
decision has been made.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that we've all agreed that monthly may be too much, except for Ms. Smith.
Well,
No, he said it.
I would
Maurice?
No, but I mean, you were he would consider the other one. She's a definitely no on anything else.
I did
So-
not
so-
say a definite nothing. Come on now.
So I think Hobin's response actually, answers all the questions. In other words, we do meet monthly till November, December off, and then we revisit it in January. Is that correct?
We can't hear you.
For the people that want quarterly, that's one more meeting till we reconsider again. And for the people that want monthly, they have a little time to convince others that quarterly won't work. It's just one more. November is the next one more
I
meeting
don't
we're
think we're
adding.
ready for quarterly. That's just me.
Lobbyists.
Yeah, Karen, we want to hear you, so we're going to put the mic closer. Say that again.
So you're talking about lobbyists.
Sounds like a lobbyist.
Sounds like lobbying.
In
Okay,
the
so,
interest of time, I will go with that.
okay, so just to make sure, so we're making a decision tonight that the meetings will continue as they are with December off, reconvening in January to consider how things go forward from there. So monthly meetings, that means a
I just want to
meeting in
add this
October,
one
meeting in-
caveat to that.
I'm asking if I'm hearing correctly.
You are, but I just want
Okay.
to, I don't have the energy or the time to not have anything to meet about. So the caveat I'm asking Prosper Portland is that if we're going to be committing to meeting monthly, that we have something that we're talking about and having to really think about, take in, ingest, and make recommendations on, and not just to kind of be around the edges with little things, right? So for example, and I'm going to be clear on this one because this is a big one and I know, with the Hill Block, I need to have the answers that I asked last year about the Hill Block answered in order for me to even move forward with any recommendation or to sit down and have a meeting on this without those answers, or we're just right back where we started, for me. So that's what I'm asking, that if I'm meeting every month, that I have something to meet every month about.
Can I add one more?
You can add all that you need to.
Okay, so to that end, so let's say we go month to month till November, and let's say November, we have our debrief meeting with Prosper Portland and as chairs, and we feel like there's nothing that requires us to meet, then we cancel the meeting. How about that? If there's no content to meet.
Yeah, I could agree with that, but what I would sit there and say is a letter going out to the committee basically saying, because of the lack of information, we clearly call out what we were expecting to receive, that we did not receive, we are canceling this meeting. And so that it doesn't seem like we're canceling because we're doing something else, we're canceling because of lack of information that we've asked for, we haven't received it, so therefore, there's no need to meet. But I think it needs to be clearly written out by our chairs.
And the information that we want to be distributed is we're asking it to come from Prosper Portland.
And we also say, as a subcommittee investment, this group met, and we were not able to have any report out, so that's why we canceled it.
I do want to say that it's very top-heavy that you wouldn't meet because of us not providing information. That will probably not be the only reason why you may not meet. There could be a variety of other reasons, or you might find that you have the information from other subcommittees too. So I just want that to be clear that, again, our desire is not to be obstructionist to your progress, but we have to earn that too by providing you information in a timely way, which we're committed to.
Thank you for that.
All right, we are at the end. If there's any other thing that we need to cover? Okay. I don't want to open any cans or any rabbit trails, but I certainly would like an opportunity to speak as a person and facilitator in response to the impact you communicated.
In response to what?
Earlier, the conversation about facilitator and how this all transpired.
Sorry, you can't do that, sir. You can't take it personal as a facilitator. You can't respond.
Oh, it's not personal.
You already got your deal. We're good to go. It's nothing about you.
I agree. I agree. So it wasn't.
Open it up.
Okay.
Let's go open it up.
Okay. All right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.